Hello. 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 Hello.
Silence heard around the world by the 11 players from Iran's national football team who chose not to sing along to the country's national anthem.
Hello.
জয়েন করছে?
হ্যাঁ, জয়েন করেছে
তো আচ্ছা, এই তো আমাদের আব্দুল মান্নান জয়েন করেছেন। আমি সুমিত মুখার্জি।
প্রফেসর সুমিত মুখার্জি, নমস্কার, গুড আফটারনুন।
নমস্কার, সো নাইস অফ ইউ, আপনি জয়েন করেছেন। আমাদের ভাইস
শোনার জন্য জয়েন করলাম, কি বলেন?
নিশ্চয়ই আরো বেশ কয়েকজন জয়েন করবেন। আমরা এক্ষুনি ভাইস নিয়ে আসছি। আপনি 16 তারিখে আসছেন?
এখনো জানি না, এখনো আনসার্টেন। আমি জানলে জানাবো আপনাকে। হ্যালো, পেয়েছো? ওই যে স্টার কাবাব আছে না, পিৎজা হাট পাশ দিয়ে ঢুকলে টেক এ রাইট টার্ন, বাম দিকে 2 নম্বর বিল্ডিং, 87
বাংলাদেশের এক্স ইউনিসি চেয়ার এখনো জয়েন করেনি, আসল জাতীয় জয়েন করছেন না, মুশকিল।
হ্যাঁ, ওকে। ওই উপরে কে যাবে তার নামগুলো লিখে দিতে পারো, ওটা ব্ল্যাঙ্ক কার্ড তো, উপরে নাম লেখা থাকতে ভালো। থ্যাংক ইউ।
পাঁচটি অভিযোগের যে কোনো একটি প্রমাণিত হলেই সেই সরকারি কর্মকর্তাকে চাকরিতে রাখা হবে না বলে সরকারের দায়িত্বশীল সূত্রগুলো মনে করছে। তবে সবচেয়ে বেশি রাজনৈতিক বিষয়টি বিবেচনা করা হবে। নবম দশম ব্যাচে যে সমস্ত সরকারি কর্মকর্তারা বিএনপি জামাত জোট সরকারের আমলে সুবিধাভোগী ছিল এবং বিএনপি জামাত জোট সরকারের সহযোগী হিসেবে চিহ্নিত তার তালিকা করা হয়েছে। এরকম 56 জন সরকারি কর্মকর্তাকে পাওয়া গেছে যাদের চাকরির মেয়াদ 25 বছর উত্তীর্ণ হয়েছে এবং যারা বিএনপি এবং জামায়াতের পক্ষে কাজ করতেন বলে অভিযোগ পাওয়া গেছে। এই কারণে তাদের পদোন্নতি বঞ্চিত হয়েছে। নবম ব্যাচের অধিকাংশ কর্মকর্তাই সচিব অথবা অতিরিক্ত
উৎস আপনি জয়েন করেছেন? হ্যাভ ইউ জয়েন্ট?
Yes, I'm here.
ও আচ্ছা, এই যে আই এম সৌমিত মুখার্জি।
Okay, হ্যাঁ
দেখতে পাচ্ছেন? দেখতে পাচ্ছেন?
দেখতে পাচ্ছি, হ্যাঁ।
আমাদের ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর আসছেন এক্ষুনি। উইল স্টার্ট। আমি ব্যবস্থা করছি, আমি ব্যবস্থা করছি। এখান থেকে বললে শোনা যাবে দীপক?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, যে কোনো জায়গা থেকে বললেই শোনা যাবে।
আমি অ্যানাউন্সটা করে দিই। তখন কি হয় আমার পাশে এটা তো It is my privilege to announce that the second lecture of the Diaspora Colloquium, the year-long Diaspora Colloquium, organized by the Center for Studies on Bengali Diaspora, University of Kalyani, is being held today. And our honored speaker today is Dr. Utsho Mukherjee, lecturer in education, Department of Education, College of Business, Arts and Social Sciences, Brunei University, London. Some of his important publications include Only So That My Daughter Gets Exposure to the Culture, Ethnic Leisure Practices and Intangible Cultural Heritage in British Indian Diasporic Families. This was published in Society and Leisure. And in another joint paper with Z. Ali, he has published that We Are Not Equal Citizens in Any Respect, Citizenship, Education, and the Routinization of Violence in the Everyday Lives of Religious Minority Youth in Pakistan. This was published in Diaspora, Indigenous and Minority Education. Now, I'm honored to announce that our Honorable Vice Chancellor has very kindly consented to chair this session, and it was he who directed us to hold this colloquium lecture in the Secretariat of the Honorable Vice Chancellor. Despite a recent bereavement, he has still been kind enough to come and chair this session. I now request our Honorable Vice Chancellor to please address this colloquium, and then the lecture shall begin.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. It is my pleasure to chair the second lecture of the year-long Diaspora Colloquium organized by Center for Studies on Bengali Diaspora, University of Kalyani, to be delivered online by Dr. Utsho Mukherjee. The topic, Durga Puja in London, is of contemporary relevance. Bengalis residing abroad have been celebrating this festival with great fanfare, and the participation of Bengali diaspora in the event is indeed noteworthy. It is more of a cultural than a religious event, which assumes added significance after UNESCO conferment of heritage status to Durga Puja in Bengal. Bengalis are scattered throughout the globe, and everywhere they have made it a point to preserve their indigenous roots through the retention and reaffirmation of their cultural heritage. Durga Puja is celebrated in various European countries and is now a medium of culture cross fertilization. I heartily wish this program of the year-long colloquium a grand success and hope that it will enlighten teachers, students, and research scholars and inspire them with new research inputs which would redound to the lasting benefit of our university. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I have one more very pleasant task to perform in your presence before I request Dr. Mukherjee to start his lecture. We have a very distinguished guest, Mr. Abdul Mannan, who has joined from Bangladesh. He is the ex-chairman of the UGC Bangladesh and also the former vice chancellor of Bangladesh in a university, a renowned university of Bangladesh. He has been very kind to join online, and may I take this opportunity of introducing him to our honorable vice chancellor, Dr. Mannan. This is our honorable vice chancellor, Professor Manoj Sannal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honorable Vice Chancellor. It is my great pleasure to be with you, though not in person, but virtually, because we live in currently in a virtual world. And I got a little bit interested because the issue is on diaspora, though I am not a person who has done any work on diaspora, but I am aware of the diaspora in London because I have lived in London. I have traveled across 100 countries and 200 cities around the world. So I have seen how the diasporas live, carry their culture, spread their culture amongst the people around the world. With these few words, I would like to thank Dr. Sumit Mukherjee for inviting me. And before our distinguished speaker, speaks her paper or talks on her paper, I'd like to thank her also for bringing or sharing this her interest and her experience living in London diaspora, because London has at least 2 million Bangladeshi at least. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now, with permission of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, I invite Dr. Utsho Mukherjee to make his presentation. He is going to deliver the second Diaspora Colloquium lecture, and the topic is Durga Puja in London. Now, Dr. Utsho Mukherjee, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation in the first place. I hope you can hear me okay. So I'm just going to share my screen because I have a presentation. If you can let me know if you can see my screen, that will be great. Yes. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Very much.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So I'll make a start. And I'm really honored to be here as part of this colloquium, and I'm really excited to share this work. So the presentation today is entitled The Puja and the Pandemic, because the work I'm going to share is going to be quite specific about Durga Puja in the UK, but in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially the autumn of 2020, when I actually carried out some of the field work for this project. But I'll get into that in a minute. So in the course of this presentation, I'll start by talking a bit about my own research background and where this project fits in. And then I'm going to talk a bit more about Durga Puja and its particular context, diasporic context. Then I'm going to introduce the project that I did around Durga Puja and some of the major themes and key kind of takeaways in terms of thinking about diasporic lives that this project really offers. So to begin with, just a few disclaimer really. So I am not a scholar of religion, and I did not approach this project of the study of Durga Puja in the diaspora as a scholar of religion, but rather as a sociologist who is interested in questions of migration, transnationalism, and diaspora. So I've been working on the kind of UK-based Indian diaspora for the past 7 years, and my monograph is coming out in February from Bristol University Press, which looks at the leisure lives of Indian diasporic children living in and around London. And I'm really interested in thinking about the way social class and race intersect in the leisure spaces of children in the diaspora, how the role that leisure spaces play in reproducing class advantages as well as racial and ethnic identities. So that has been my background. I'm really interested in questions of cultural reproduction, around questions of social inequality, and so on. So it's from this vantage point that I approach the question of Durga Puja in the diaspora. So just to make that clear in the beginning. So as all of you know, Durga Puja has often been kind of described as one of the most important festival in the social calendar of Bengal. And the worship is, of course, kind of around the festival kind of revolve around the worship of goddess Durga, the kind of the great goddess of the Hindu pantheon. And some of the early myth of Durga can be found in Sanskrit texts dating back to 5th and 6th century CE. And especially the text Devi Mahatma, which kind of is where the mythology or the iconography of Durga flows from. The myth of Durga slaying demon-headed Mahishasura and so on that underpins this iconography comes from those early texts around from 5th and 6th century onwards. But there's certainly a distinctive Bengali regional tradition of Durga Puja that sets it apart from the way the goddess is worshipped in other parts of India, for example. And the textual sources or kind of first mention of some of the Bengali specific regional traditions of Durga Puja is found from around 12th century onwards. So one of the way that it differs, for example, is in the combination of Vedic and Tantric methods in the worship of goddess Durga in Bengal. That is often not the case in other parts of India, where the Mahadevi, or the great goddess of the Hindu pantheon, is worshipped as part of, say, the 9-day Navratri festival. So there are those kind of theological debates about the worship of the goddess and the kind of the rituals and iconography that I'm not really getting into because that's not my forte, but it's important to set that context for thinking about Durga Puja today and the way the iconography and the customs around the puja have shifted over the years from being the exclusive reserve of landed gentry in whose houses Durga Puja first began in Bengal to being a mass festival today. So that journey is quite important to consider when we think of Durga Puja in the diaspora, where the diasporic Durga Puja fits in that long history of Durga Puja in Bengal, starting at least from 12th century. So, as many of you are aware, Durga Puja is celebrated across the global Hindu Bengali diaspora. And Hindu Bengalis from both India and Bangladesh are involved in the staging of these festivals, including in the UK. And at its simplest, there are two kind of elements to the Durga Puja celebration in the diaspora. One is a kind of ritual worship of the goddess, if you like, the puja, and the festivities of the Utsav, which are central to community building, cultural reproduction, in establishing and kind of nurturing a sense of belonging in the diaspora, but also about placemaking, how migrant and diasporic groups stake claim in the social imaginary of the places that they live in currently, and how they make place, that is how they imbue meaning to certain spaces and create places of community togetherness and of celebration. So it's really, so therefore the festival aspect of it really kind of has a important political role in the cultural life of the diaspora, and that needs to be recognized. And as a sociologist, I'm really interested in this aspect of the puja, what kind of community is built through the production of Durga Puja celebrations, but also whom it excludes, for example, in the diaspora. So in the UK, around 70 Durga Pujas are organized every year. And by UK, I mean England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And the majority is, of course, in England, and most certainly in and around London, where dozens of Durga Puja are held. But also there are many Durga Pujas held in other parts of the UK. So this figure is kind of comes from some of the compilation that the community group called Indian Bengalis in UK have done. They have a website and a Facebook group, and they collate information and create kind of an interactive Google map every year during the puja, so people can see where Durga Puja is happening in and around them. And so this figure comes from them, and this is pre-pandemic, and I'll get into what happened post-pandemic in a bit. So that's the context of Durga Puja in the diaspora. Now, in thinking about Durga Puja and the diaspora, as I said, I'm approaching it from a sociological perspective rather than from a theological one. So my sort of, if you like, the theoretical framing, the conceptual lens that I'm using to understand Durga Puja festivals in the diaspora is that of lived religion. It comes from the sociology of religion, and it breaks away from a preoccupation with official texts, institutions, religious experts, that are often central to the study of religion. And instead, it lays emphasis on how religion is lived out in the everyday practices of ordinary people. So it shifts focus from the theological to the sociological, from the text and experts to everyday practices, and what it means, the subjective meaning and experiences of religion, rather than to the study of religion as a sort of disembodied kind of textual exercise. So by embracing this turn towards lived religion, so my work captures the kind of UK-based Hindu Bengali migrants' subjective understanding and practices of religion vis-a-vis the organization of Durga Puja festivals in the autumn of 2020. So the lived religion of Hindu Bengalis in the diaspora, at least in the UK, pivots mostly around personal worship undertaken by erecting small-scale domestic shrines or to the installation of images and idols. So it's very much a domestic exercise. And this particularly makes sense because although there are lots of temples and other institutions, institutional structures for the practice of religion in the UK now, and there are temples all over big cities, none of them are actually geared towards Hindu Bengali regional traditions of Hinduism. Most of the temples are kind of built by Hindu Gujaratis or Hindu Punjabis and so on. And there are therefore kind of distinctions around linguistic and regional traditions of Hinduism. And that really kind of calls into question the way we think about religion and the way it's fractured by regional linguistic caste lines in India and as well as in the diaspora. So a collective festival such as Durga Puja is quite central to the community lives of diasporic Bengalis, every Hindu Bengalis, I must say, in the diaspora. But it also presents something of a cosmological problem, what Brown calls a cosmological problem for diasporic Hindu Bengalis. That is, Durga Puja is specifically tied to a place and to a people. It's tied to Bengal and it's tied to a particular regional tradition. So therefore, how do you stage a festival in Britain that is intimately tied to places and communities in Bengal? And in doing so, in resolving this cosmological problem, a lot of changes or modifications are made in the way Durga Puja is staged in the diaspora, which is kind of quite key to thinking about what happened during the pandemic. So, as I was saying, in resolving the cosmological problem of mounting Durga Puja in the pandemic, the organizers of Durga Puja festivals in the UK make a number of changes and modifications, or what we can call a series of religious accommodations in the diaspora, which differs from the way the festival is organized in large swathes of South Asia, for example. So many of them actually bring Durga idols, votive materials, celebrity guests, priests from India to recreate rituals. But in the process, they make a lot of innovations and accommodations to the way the festival is held. So for example, rather than holding the festival on dates specified in the Hindu Luli solar calendar, like Durga Puja in Bengal do, most diasporic pujas in Britain are often condensed into a weekend. So they're often a 3-day weekend running from Friday to Sunday, or they're just Saturday, Sunday pujas, where no matter when the puja is in the actual dates of the Ponjika, they are kind of condensed and multiple days of the rituals are performed in a single day, because it's just a logistical challenge, because lots of people won't get a leave from work to attend a puja if it happens in the middle of the week, middle of the British working week, which is from Monday to Friday. So just as a practical solution, it's brought over to the weekend. And also the Durga Pujas are all held indoors rather than outdoors. So in most community-based Durga Pujas in Bengal, what we call Sarbojanin Durgotsav, they are always held kind of in the commons, in the public spaces, in neighborhoods, sort of where temporary pandals are set up for the installation of the idol. But that cannot happen in somewhere like the UK. So most of the Durga Puja, almost all the Durga Pujas actually happen indoors in rented halls, such as community centers are hired, or even church halls are hired, where Durga Puja happens for the 2 days and everything is packed away. And that's the end of the affair. And another key difference is in the use of the idol, because first of all, there isn't any availability of artisans to make a clay idol every year, like is the case in Bengal. So what they do, they procure fiberglass Durga idols from India, transport it to the UK, reuse it for 5 to 7 years, and then get another one. So at the end of those 2 or 3 days of Durga Puja, the fiberglass idol is actually sort of dismantled, packed, and stored in a paid storage facility or in the garage of one of the organizers. And it's not immersed in a water body like it's done in Bengal. And of course, there are water pollution laws which forbid immersion of idols like that in the water body. So you cannot have a Visarjan every year. So these kind of practical considerations, such as the pattern of the working week in the UK, water pollution laws, the spaces that are available for this kind of festivals, means that the Durga Puja in the diaspora takes a very different form to what it does in Bengal. And my argument here is, rather than seeing it as a deviation or as a derivative of the real Durga Puja that happens in Bengal, we can see it as part of a wider continuum or the trajectory of Durga Puja's historical development. So as I was saying, Durga Puja started off as sort of in Rajbaris, in the houses of landed gentry, as quite a domestic worship. And then it developed into a community-based worship, which happens outdoors in the neighborhood for everybody to kind of get involved. And then this kind of indoor Durga Pujas with idols being reused, with days being kind of shortened, is therefore part of that wider trajectory of the longue durée, if you like, of Durga Puja, rather than seeing it as a deviation from the real thing. And the pandemic gave it yet another kind of step change, if you like, in how it happens. So this is a picture representative, a picture I took in 2018 when I was doing field work for my book project that I showed you in the beginning. So there's a Durga Puja just in the outskirts of London. And as you can see, it's in an indoor venue. And the Durga idol is quite small scale. It's sort of a human-sized idol. And then at the end of the puja, all of this is kind of dismantled and put away in a storage facility to be reused next year. And it happens, this was taken on a Sunday, I think. So this puja happens over the weekend so that more people can attend. That wouldn't happen if it was happening on a weekday, because there are no public holidays for Durga Puja for obvious reasons. So this is what Durga Puja used to be like before the pandemic, where people would come together. There'll be stalls for Indian food. There'll be cultural celebrations, performances being put up, and it'll be an occasion for people to kind of get to know one another, build network, build community. So for lots of sort of Hindu Bengali migrants who first come to the UK, it's difficult to meet others and build that kind of co-ethnic social network. And often Facebook groups are set up which bring these people together. They form WhatsApp groups and they get to know one another. And occasions like the Durga Puja becomes one of the only time in the year when they can come together in a physical space to get to know one another, take part in festivities. And therefore it has an important, very pivotal role in bringing the community together and in helping develop a sense of belonging, a sense of ethnic social capital, if you like, in the diaspora. And that was all going quite well. There are, as I said, around 70 Durga Pujos, which used to be held before the pandemic. And they were quite central to the social calendar of Hindu Bengali diaspora in the UK. And then, of course, the pandemic hit in 2020. And with COVID-19 restrictions that were in place at the time of the Durga Puja in 2020 in the UK, no such in-person community festivals could go ahead because only maximum of 6 people could meet outdoors at the time. And at the time of the Durga Puja, there were region-specific restrictions in the UK. So if the infection rate was higher in a particular region, you would have more stringent public health measures around people meeting each other and social distancing norms and so forth. And if the infection rate was lower, the restrictions were slightly different. So it was very regional specific. But across the UK, UK is going through what is now being referred to as the second wave of the pandemic, which the records show ended up taking more lives than the first wave. So it was quite an ideal time to host an in-person community festival when sort of those COVID restrictions were in place. So in light of this, many Durga Puja organizers in Britain cancelled their annual Durga Puja celebrations. But others did go ahead with their Durga Puja festivals, but in a modified form. So some actually organized small-scale ritual worship of the goddess in the living room of a priest or the living room of a festival organizer, and then live streamed the whole thing on Facebook group, on Facebook pages or YouTube channels of the organizing group. And others actually did hold small-scale sort of worship of the goddess in a hired venue and had a slot booking system where only up to 5 to 6 people can book a particular timing to come and see the goddess and go away without interacting with others or without taking part in any kind of rituals that involve touching or so on. So I carried out this project at that time of the 2020 Durga Puja in the UK, where I undertook observation of these live streams of Durga Pujas held by around 20 to 30 Durga Puja organizing groups in the UK who went ahead with the celebrations in 2020. And then I followed it up with telephonic interviews with 22 Durga Puja organizers from across England, Wales, and Scotland. To my knowledge, there weren't any Durga Puja happening in Northern Ireland in 2020. And the fieldwork for this was supported by the Economic and Social Research Council, because at the time I was ESRC postdoctoral fellow at the University of Southampton, where I carried out the fieldwork for this project. So what I'm going to do for the rest of my talk is to sort of reflect on some of the things that I found in this fieldwork around the way Durga Puja was organized and the kind of subjective meanings and understandings people brought to bear on the Durga Puja celebrations in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. So this is one kind of image of what Durga Puja looked like under lockdown. This is from the Durga Puja organizing group called Indian Cultural Society in Cambridge, where you can see the priest is wearing a visor and they haven't kind of wheeled out their fiberglass idol, but instead they're using an image of the idol. And everything is happening in the living room of an organizer and is being live streamed to members and whoever is interested for free through Facebook and YouTube. So this is a flavor of what happened in 2020 under lockdown. So when I spoke to the organizers about the way the planning for the pujo went in 2020, it's important to bear in mind that before 2020, before the pandemic hit, many of these organizers had a blueprint, if you like, of how to mount a Durga Puja celebration. So they had developed their own kind of organizational strategy over the years of bringing votive materials and idols from India, bringing priests from India, doing things a certain way. So there was an established kind of blueprint that has kind of developed in the diaspora. But with the pandemic and with the new restrictions, all of that kind of went out of the window because they had to think differently about how to plan and organize the Durga Puja celebrations. So, and that created a sense of uncertainty. And the 3 quotes that's on the screen are actually from 3 different organizers who spoke to me about the challenges they faced in making the puja happen, despite the COVID-19 public health restrictions that made it very difficult to do things the way they were used to doing pre-pandemic. So as one organizer said, because the situation was sort of fluid, all the planning was also fluid. Another one said we had to take one time at a day towards the end. Even in July and August, we didn't know whether we could do it physically or virtually. Another said we constantly had to think through scenarios. So by August, we had 4 scenarios outlined from a completely full pujo to a completely virtual pujo. So the point which is kind of important to acknowledge here is that a lot of these organizers are middle-class professionals. So many of them that I spoke to who are actively involved in the organizations are doctors, IT professionals, software engineers, business sort of executives, academics, and so on. And they were drawing on their work identities and the kind of systems and structures they're used to at work to approach the planning of the puja. So by what I mean is that they were using spreadsheets and online kind of working platforms to have these multiple scenarios and contingency plans. They were approaching the puja as they would approach a work event in the way they were planning it, in the way they were thinking about this kind of multiple scenarios. How do you have what to do for each eventuality and so on. So this kind of use of those skills that they use at work to think about and planning the Durga Puja is important to consider. But also important to consider is the fact that a lot of these people do the organization on a voluntary capacity. So many of the doctors were actually facing the pandemic from the front lines, and their workload was through the roof at the time. And despite that, they were trying to make time to plan the Durga Puja. So that's something quite important to them, and we'll get to why in a moment. But so that was how they were approaching the organizational side of things, even before, in the summer of 2020, leading up to the actual puja. And in doing so, what many of them ended up doing is a blended puja, which had a physical element where the worship actually happened in a very small scale, as I said, in kind of people's living rooms or in small hired venues. And then most of the people got to take part in the puja virtually through the live streams that were put out. So it was really a sense of a blended puja that tied together different spatialities and temporalities, and in ways that illuminate what Campbell calls religious social shaping of technology. And I'll get into this idea of religious social shaping of technology in a moment. And it also illuminates some of the adaptations that characterize diasporic lived religion in the Hindu Bengali diaspora. So one organizer said that we hire a house where the priest and his wife will be there. And then we decided to share our puja on Facebook and YouTube via the Streamia platform. Another said we had Anjalis all over Zoom all 3 days of our pujo. People from the US and various European countries like France, the Netherlands, Switzerland, when people from India registered online, or we sent them a Zoom link in advance, which let them take part in Anjalis. And this is really interesting because Durga Puja has had an online presence at least since the late 1990s. One of the first websites that were launched about Durga Puja was in 1999, early 2000, where pictures and videos of Durga Puja, recipes of Durga Puja aimed at diasporic Bengalis was launched. And since then, there have been ample websites, social media accounts, which give diasporic Bengalis a flavor of the way Durga Puja celebrations are going in Kolkata, for example. So these online kind of audio visuals of Durga Puja are produced in Kolkata, produced in Bengal for the consumption of diasporic Bengalis based elsewhere in the world. But with the pandemic, this dynamic kind of shifted to an extent, because at the time, because of the Kolkata High Court order around festival or around Durga Pujas, people had very restricted access to Durga Puja pandals in 2020. And very few people could actually give Anjalis in their neighborhood pandal because of the High Court order and the other kind of physical distancing norms that were there. And therefore, a lot of them who had some contacts or had family members and friends living in the UK who were involved in Durga Puja organization here, they actually turned to them. And when they got to hear that they were doing Anjalis over Zoom, they actually signed up. And many people from India were giving Anjali through Zoom in Durga Pujas were happening in the UK. So for the first time, the direction of flow of information and religiosity actually flipped, where conventionally it is the diasporic Bengalis who consume religious kind of audio visuals and other stuff put out by people in India. But this was one of the first time where people in India were consuming or taking part in religious activities happening in the diaspora as their kind of preferred choice, because they didn't have a lot of those opportunities in and around them. So which was quite interesting to note. And to go back to this point of religious social shaping of technology, it's just the idea that technology doesn't shape religion in a unidirectional way, but actually religious actors shape or bring their own set of ideas in the way they use technology. So it's not only technological determinism, but technology determines the way technology is used in religion, but rather it's religious actors who have their own agency in shaping their use of technology in the context of religion. So they weren't really determining religious practices, but technologies themselves were being shaped and put to novel use by religious subjects, in this case, diasporic Hindu Bengalis. So a lot of these organizers actually mobilized platforms like Zoom, which was designed for meetings and for events like this, not for a religious occasion or interactive Anjali, but they were actually mobilizing these quote-unquote secular technologies for religious practices like interactive Anjalis. They were also using spaces like, so on many occasions, I was watching these live streams on Facebook Live where people were streaming the rituals, and people were using emojis like folded hand emoji or flower emoji, which mirror the physical act of the Anjali, where people kind of fold their hands or offer prayer to the goddess. So because they couldn't do it in person, they were using emojis as a proxy for physical offerings of flowers. Through these practices, both the producers and consumers of blended Durga Pujas therefore blurred the distinction between the physical and the virtual, and integrated the use of digital technologies with existing practices of in-person worship. So, and also some of the more interesting aspects, interesting ways in which embodied practices of Durga Puja were incorporated into this blended online Durga Pujas, where, say, for example, the fire worship that happens, the home that happens. So in one Durga Puja organizing group, they actually did their small scale kind of fire worship in the place that they had doing the puja, and then tried to attempted to trap, if you like, the heat and the soot of the home in aluminium foil and send it to members by post. So that was one of the ways in which they embodied the sensorial aspect of the physical puja and was being incorporated into this blended online offline version of the puja. Another way was the distribution of sanctified food or bhog. So many of them would actually go around the city and deliver it to their members, because the members couldn't come and take part in the puja, almost like kind of a delivery service of sorts. And so some of the ways in which the libation rituals were kind of shoehorned into some of these blended Durga Puja festivals, which are quite interesting in itself. So I think it sort of illustrates some of the ways in which the religious actors were shaping the use of technology rather than technology determining the way religious practices go. These are some of the posters from Durga Puja festival. So the one on your left is from Bilete Bangali, which is a Facebook group that has grown quite big, and it hosts its own Durga Puja. And again, the emphasis is very much the fact that stay home and watch it virtually. And similarly, the other one on the right is from a group called Essex Indians. And as you can see, it really emphasizes how the pandemic the pandemic messaging around washing hands, safe space, and also save the NHS, which is the National Health Service. So the National Health Service is the UK's kind of state-funded healthcare, which is free at the point of use. And during the pandemic, there was a great deal of effort or kind of public attention paid to the work that the NHS does. And so they were incorporating those pandemic messages in the form of a chadmala. And they were putting this oxygen mask on the goddess's kind of face in this poster. And the key message that you can see is the fact that the puja is virtual, prayer is real. And again, that actually builds on some of the existing practices that we have seen where kind of those who practice Hinduism has for a long time taken virtual representations or images or online avatars of gods and goddesses as ontologically real forms of the divine. And this idea, which is quite embedded among practicing Hindus, therefore found a new expression in these kind of blended pujas. So what I'm trying to say is that the fact that virtual manifestation of the goddess, or that fact that you have an image rather than an idol, hasn't made a lot of difference in the way people understand an ontologically real divine. And therefore, it was relatively easier for people to actually accept and accommodate this kind of blended pujas in their lived religious practices. So going back to the other point that I was making at the beginning about the trajectory, the historical trajectory of Durga Puja from 12th century onwards, starting off in the houses of landed gentry and elites and the Rajbaris, through the way it has come to the Parar Puja. And I see the blended puja as a continuation of that trajectory, rather than a break away from it. So if it starts from 12th century with Rajbari, goes to the para, goes to the pandal, and then goes to the blended form where people are consuming the puja from the comfort of their living room, but the Durga Puja is actually happening in a space far away where it's being live streamed. So I want to see all of this in context of a widening, ever-changing practice of Durga Puja that has never been fixed, that has always changed with time. So in doing so, a lot of the organizers actually emphasized the fact that doing the Durga Puja despite the challenges of the pandemic was actually quite important to them, because they were trying to mobilize the myth of the goddess as a way to make sense of the pandemic and as a way to find a way through the pandemic. So one organizer said, so he's a retired civil servant who kind of helps organize the puja in the Midlands in England. He said it was a test from the goddess that can you overcome all of this and yet reach out to me and complete the puja. Another said, what would be more significant than doing puja this year when mankind is faced with COVID and where the blessing of Ma Durga is more important perhaps than ever. Another person who is actually a medical doctor by profession, and he acts as a priest for the 2 days of the puja. So he's not a priest by profession. And that's another point that I'll come to in a minute. So he said that, look, pandemics have happened in the past. One of the Anjali mantras that we chant is Horo Mari, where Mari means pandemic. So when he was doing this Anjali over Zoom, he was pointing it out to the devotees that pandemics have been around for a long time. It's nothing new. We are praying to Ma Durga to liberate us from this Mari, from the Mahamari. So old mantras, existing mantras were taking on new meanings in the context of the COVID pandemic. And that was quite interesting in the way that people were kind of mobilizing the Durga myth in very pandemic specific ways. So yeah, just to wrap up now. So I think I began with the point that the festivals are quite pivotal to reinforcing cultural identities and a sense of belonging in the diaspora. And pandemic pujas tried to bridge the physical and the virtual, the private and the public, and the embodied and disembodied in the ways that I explained. And the Durga myths were charged with the present realities and were reinscribed in the light of the pandemic. And many of the organizers who I explained were quite middle-class professionals, and they were middle-class professionals because the UK only allows people who are deemed as skill migrants, people who can come and work in particular high-earning middle-class professions, visa routes to come to the UK. And as a result, the kind of people, kind of Bengalis who have been able to come and settle in the UK over the last 20 to 30 years have been middle-class professionals. So these are people with considerable economic resources and greater control over their work schedules, which they're able to kind of then make use of to find time to do kind of to take on voluntary responsibilities of organizing festivals. And they use their work skills, for example, around creating contingency plans and spreadsheets and so on to organize the puja. And caste hierarchies, I think, and religious privilege of the Brahmin man is reinforced even when the Durga Puja goes online, in the fact that there's a great demand for finding priests, and people who are not practicing priests, who just happen to be a Brahmin man and has another profession in everyday life, is then kind of brought in for the 2 days of the puja to act as a priest, because you need that in order to make the puja happen. So it kind of reinforces that idea, the caste privileges. And lastly, the innovations around blended Durga Puja, as I argue, shouldn't be seen as a rupture or a break with the norm. It builds on existing developments that have been afoot for at least 2 decades. One is the religious shaping of technology. Religion has been part of Hindu worship for at least mid to late 1990s, where worship in the big temples have been live streamed, where Durga Puja centric websites have been launched in 1999 onwards. So there has been that element. And secondly, diasporans have always adapted themselves in hosting religious occasions. As I said, they were already condensing 5 days of the puja to 2 days. They were already reusing idols. They were already doing things differently. So the pandemic made them do things even more differently. But it wasn't a complete break from the norm. It was just another layer, another way of doing things in a long trajectory of religious accommodation and adjustment in the diaspora. So this article, the talk that I gave has come out as an article in the journal Religion earlier this year, and I think it's open access, so it's easy to find and download. So please feel free to read the article if you're interested further. And some of these ideas are fleshed out in more detail in the article. So thank you very much for listening. You can get in touch on Twitter and over regular email if you have further questions. And I have a few more minutes as well in hand. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Utsho. Some of our colleagues had also joined here. They have just left because time is running out. The Honorable Vice Chancellor has also left a short while back. We all enjoyed listening to you. It was so enlightening and it really enriched us. It was a value addition to our repertoire of knowledge. Would our distinguished guest, Mr. Abdul Mannan, like to ask Utsho anything?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes. Would you like to ask him any questions?
Thank you very much. I would just like to thank Utsho Mukherjee, because whatever she has told, I'm very much acquainted with it, because I have lived in many places, including London, and I know how Durga Puja and similar festivals of the subcontinent are usually celebrated, not only in London, but in New York, in Paris, in South Africa, and many other places. But this time, this 2 years of COVID changed a lot of normal practices. Even our 2 Eids, we have a big congregation in mosques everywhere. This last two years, 2021, 22, we were not allowed to congregate in a mosque. So we had to say our prayers in the home. So I've seen how, on Poila Boishak, the Mongol Shobha Jatra has also been acknowledged by UNESCO as a heritage. So also in London, I've seen Poila Boishak being celebrated. 21 February, our Bhasha Divas has to be celebrated. So these are the things the diasporas have taken. They have not gone just themselves. They have taken the culture, they have taken the practice, they have taken their religion abroad. So that has been happening for hundreds of years. So thank you, Dr. Utsho. I have enjoyed, though I come from a place in Chittagong where close to my house is the Chattogram Kalibari Mandir and Ramakrishna Mission Ashram and Krishna Mandir. So I have grown up amidst Durga Puja. So I know all these issues. Thank you very much.
To wind up then, I thank Utsho from the core of my heart for really providing a brilliant and extremely enlightening PowerPoint presentation. We all enjoyed it thoroughly, and Durga Puja is a topic of contemporary relevance, particularly Durga Puja celebrated by the Indian diaspora in general and Bengali diaspora in particular. And today I was talking to, I think Mr. Mannan would know her, Jebunnisa Jeba of Bangladesh. You know her, yes. I was talking to her this very morning. She, I think, is the nominee of the president in the Bangladesh Open University. She told me that she would be joining, but she didn't join here. But many of my students have joined in YouTube. So Jebunnisa might have also joined there. I'm not sure. So she also wants to participate in this Diaspora Colloquium. And she asked me for a slot. She'll be interested to talk about Durga Puja celebration in Bangladesh. So we are arranging that also. So I think, thank you, Utsho, and thank you, Mr. Mannan. Thank you all for making the second lecture of the Diaspora Colloquium a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. Thank you, Utcho.